just, I don't know whether we got properly introduced in the in the restaurant or not. I'm Graham. Can I call you Patricia?
Please do.
Okay.
Patricia, yes.
Okay. As I was saying to you before, I learned a little bit about you from Mike and from the tapes I listened to on the way down here. But just for the sort of edification of the audience out there, maybe you could just fill me in a little bit about your past and how you came to be where you are now.
Well, it certainly could be a long tale. I'll certainly make it short.
Okay.
Very roughly, I was a psychologist and doing family counseling as well as research at Berkeley. And then some experiences began to happen that caused me to be interested in other forms of expression of creativity. I was always interested in creativity. It was one of the things that I had done some research on too. But the real essence of it seemed to be somewhat mixed into what is now called psychic stuff. And I always want to clarify that word because it means so many different things to different people.
Yeah.
And what it means to me is just a very natural adjunct of our ability as beings, as people. Part of our intelligence is having hunches or being intuitive or perceiving deeply into something. And that's just one way to say it. And that there are other energies, like when you've fallen down and injured your leg and it's bruised or cut, how it heals itself. Something's happened. It's one of the great mysteries, in science. We don't really know. We don't really know what happens when something heals itself. We know cells do this and blood goes to it, but why and how and what is the mechanism that makes that happen? Well, I think part of the mechanism that makes it happen is another kind of energy or something else, which we, again, don't have words for. And a lot of what I'm about now is sharing in ways that I hope are practical for people. Some of the experiences I've had and things I've discovered about not only healing or what kind of environment or what kind of situation helps healing happen, but really about a whole other level of us as people, as human beings, a whole other level of our own abilities that are very natural and very much our birthright and not at all really extraordinary, except that we make them extraordinary.
Okay, I'd just kind of like to get into a little bit about this whole thing about energy.
Yes.
Okay, what you're talking about is energy that comes from within a person, is that correct?
Well, yes, and I wouldn't close it up that tight either, because there certainly is an experience many times where I feel energy feels like it's flowing through me, and that sort of implies coming from somewhere else too. I think we, the inner and the outer, the whole dichotomy, the way our language is even set up, that we think in terms of either this or that. We don't think of this and that. That two things that may look contradictory could actually possibly coexist at the same time. That if our view was big enough, in other words, it could come from inside and it also could come from outside, both at the same time.
Okay, maybe you could just sort of repeat what you were saying about it coming from within and without.
Well, it is that so much of one of the problems and one of the reasons why we don't understand energy and we don't understand healing and we don't understand telepathy or other extrasensory perception or whatever that means, one of the reasons why we make it very bizarre and strange is because we hold it in such a way that comes from the structure of the normal way we think. Which is it's this or it's that, either I'm telling you or you're reading my mind, and if you're reading my mind, that feels immediately scary to people because of so many, we really don't love ourselves enough and we think that we're thinking all kinds of bad things we don't want anybody to know about. What it really boils down to, I remember to just sort of go back a little when I was about 7 or 8, I remember being on a school bus and thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone read everybody's mind at once? If everybody just automatically could then just immediately read everybody else's mind. Then everybody would realize that everybody else is thinking the same kinds of thoughts. And, at first it would be horrible. First everybody would go, oh, it's terrible. But then everybody realized that, we were all really basically thinking very similar kinds of thoughts, and that it was interesting, and that it was actually beautiful we could read each other's thoughts. And I remember saying that out loud to a friend, and she looked at me like I was crazy.
Okay, just on that topic for a minute. What
Mhm.
about the sort of the natural, or at least what I would think of being natural, the natural thoughts of, wow, she's really nice, but look at her hair, or
Mhm.
he's really nice, but
Yes.
he's such a pig, or something like that.
He's really nice, but he's
Uh,
well,
you know,
it's very good, because when you get right down to it, you say some. It's in fact one of the examples I use in a workshop. It's the but and whole thing anyway. If say you're my friend, and say you have this ring on, and I say you've been a dear friend for a long time, and all of a sudden I see my ring on your finger, and I go, if I have to conclude that you are not any longer my friend because I see my ring on your finger, if I go, oh, you are my friend, and oh, you're not my friend, then it's either or. But if I say, you're my friend, and how come you got my ring on your finger? Do you see the difference? What we tend to do to people is not talk about it too much, not finish the communication, see something, come to a conclusion that feels scary, that the former set of rules that made for confidence seem to have been shaken. So then we go, oh, not my friend. And then suddenly, I just don't talk to you so much anymore. And all of that happens. Whereas if there were telepathy, you would know immediately, and of course there is anyway,
Yeah.
You know anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know when I think you, what did you say before? He's nice, but...
Yeah, but he's not so nice.
He's not so nice. Or he has a funny hairdo or something. People know that anyway, and they react off of it, but they have to react off of it as though they don't know. And that causes even more problems. Because then you have funny feelings, and you don't know why, and you're not able to confront exactly what it is, so you pick up on something else, and everything gets more and more messy, and we're communicating less and less honestly.
Okay, honesty. There's a good thing. I was going to try and get into that next. And the kind of feelings I get, or the what I think I hear you saying, is that total honesty is a good thing.
Well, yes and no. I think ultimately, of course, it is, because the truth does set you free, and the truth is clarity, and the truth feels good. To the degree you don't think that, or you think the truth is harmful, or all that way we were just touching on, how that'll get you in trouble, I think that is a place where we have to grow and clear out the stuff that makes the trouble. And that the job for us is to look at the stuff that makes the trouble, rather than assuming that it's just settled, it's over. You're no longer my friend, you have my ring, that's it, I can't be with you anymore. The risking, the difficult place is, how do you say, you've got my ring, and how come? Mostly what we do is, kind of try to get around it, or finally explode angrily when something else happens. We get annoyed at that person for lots of other little things, because we really have energy on something else. Where, if I know you are a good person, if I trust that, and I know I'm a good person, and I trust that, then I say, hey, how come you got my ring? And you can say, God, I just wanted it and I took it. Or you can say, which is the worst, I mean, that's the stealing it. That's as far as you go. Or, oh, you left it at my house and I put it on so I wouldn't forget to give it to you.
Okay, let's carry that just a little bit further into the reaction of saying, okay, I saw it, I liked it, I wanted it. Now, if we're talking about honesty and sort of I think the energy that comes from being honest, it seems to me there's two ways you can go.
Yes.
You can say, well, you're a thief, or else you can get into the forgiveness aspect of it.
Well, see, the forgiveness and the thief are two polarities. They're way poles apart. I think that all of that can fit into one thing, which is I created having a friend who was going to take something of mine so we could stop and look at all of that and talk about it. That all this stuff here in our world is really here for us to bring consciousness into it. And that no ring is worth that. and it's my ring. And I'm going to say, hey, I want my ring, you know, or whatever. So I'm not saying that it doesn't matter that you took my ring. I'm not saying I shouldn't, you know, hey, I want my ring back or whatever. But I am saying that you take responsibility that, and this is just a way to look at it, so that you begin to feel more power and more ability to communicate and feel okay about what you're perceiving. That the trick and the journey in consciousness is to find a way to get it all out that we all feel good. So ultimately, yes, truth is great and it does set you free. And of course, when we've got a whole bunch of stuff already set up, you don't just go slam. You know that you can't do that, that someone's not going to understand. But when you know that someone's not going to understand, then stop and think, why have I chosen someone and why do I feel uncomfortable about even saying it? What am I doing? See, rather than just getting stuck on the ring as the only issue, it's not yours, it's mine, you shouldn't have it. Let everything in this situation, the friendship, everything, be part of the exploration of what are we going to do about this? And how do I feel? The everything including, do I feel afraid to ask you? Do I feel angry, and why do I feel angry? Do I feel angry just really because I'm afraid? See, we say, well, I'm angry because you took it. We're really angry because now we got a problem. Now we got a problem is to say, one, are you really my friend anymore? Two, I want my ring back. You know, we have a lot of other things that are really in there. We're not, and it seems very self-evident to say, I'm just angry because you took my ring. Yeah, but there's lots of gradations in that. There's lots of other things you can look at. Now the trick is to know that it's you who has to clear up your internal energy so that you feel happier in the world, so that you feel clearer, and that you trust your own energy. So the thing then, yeah, it all happened, and maybe at a higher level we all went into agreement to do some of these crooked things, these bad things, or these things that aren't, you know, the way they should be, so that we actually then have to interact. We're forced to interact and find a way to interact with clarity and real truth, which I think does equal love. And I know that that's a big leap. I mean, I know that that's hard to see because it's so complicated and there's so many parts. And we've used an example maybe that isn't the clearest one, but I think you can get a little bit of a sense.
Yeah, I think so. There's just the two things that kind of come to my mind is, one, you seem to be saying that I'm responsible for the way I feel about my friend taking my ring.
Yes.
And the other one sort of seems to hit a little bit on predestiny in that, okay, maybe the ring was taken for a reason.
Yeah, right. Yes. It does. It does hit on all of that. It again is that duality thing, the either or. Someone asked me once in a workshop in Hawaii, after sitting through about an hour of it, she said, well, is it then, do you believe, which is it then? Do you believe in free will or do you believe in destiny, you know? And I said, yes.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that.
One. And the idea, the leap there, or the shift is that in some way, and I grant you, this is immense, this is very difficult. We're moving into something that is not clear and settled and clear to us. It's not. But it explains a lot of things. In fact, one of the things when I first started being interested in all of this stuff is that all my life I'd had precognitive experiences, and that means knowing something before it's happened. And some of them very complicated and very clear, and some as much as a short time, like a day or two, and others as much as several years before. One was knowing where I was going to live, when there was no chance in the world I was going to live in this place. And then 3 years later, through a series of incredible circumstances and coincidences, I lived in that place. And it was something that I couldn't afford, and all kinds of things that I never dreamed I would be there. But in any case, it's like having a precognitive experience jars you. If you do have one, it's difficult to figure out how can that fit. That's the one thing that doesn't fit in most of physics. Like telepathy, we can work on something. Healing, we can work on something to fit into the physical models of physics we have now. But precognition, knowing something before it happens, and there's statistical proof on rather simple things in lots of the research now that shows that people have that ability. Interesting, Ed Mitchell, you know, who went to the moon, set up some experiments for telepathy, and they were with cards. And so when he was out there, he was going to they were sending cards from Earth, and he was going to write down what he thought they were. Or it was the other way around, I don't remember. But in any case, what happened that was interesting is that first it looked like he got them all wrong, but what happened was they were 2 or 3 ahead. And he had a whole series of them hitting with very high accuracy, but they were all off, so he was ahead of them. So whatever they were sending, he was getting it before they sent it. And they were done randomly. So that was an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and we
Yeah.
could make cases for they're on the moon and all this, I don't know.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is that for me, anyway, I had precognitive experiences, and I didn't know how to fit that in. Everything else I could fit into the normal physics models. But then that makes you stop to consider how, even when you consider then too the left and the right brain functions, that one half of our brain, we really are fairly aware of now, is the rational, linear, logical, linguistic, the one that our culture most values, and the one where we think someone's intelligent because they are rational and logical and can come from A to B and go in a nice straight line and make it work. That's one aspect of our intelligence, and it's an incredibly important one. I don't put that down, not in any way. It's a very valuable part, and it's necessary to be there. What I do find, though, is that we have been so invested in that one that we've neglected the other hemisphere of our brain, and in fact, in our Western world, we call that the minor hemisphere, even though it weighs the same, it's the same volume, because there wasn't too much value associated to it. Someone could still talk all right if that part of their brain got damaged, but if they were a great artist, they wouldn't paint anymore, because they wouldn't get the great creativity. If they were an Einstein, they wouldn't discover E equals mc squared. So what happened was that's the creative, acausal, intuitive, where all the great scientists, and one of my studies when I was, as I said, at Berkeley, was interested in creativity and the creative personality and what kind of person is that is creative. Maslow and other people who did one of the few psychologists who really studied creative people who were already creative to see what did they do, how are they like that. One of the very common themes is that the great discoveries seem to just pop in. You know, that they're sitting in a stream playing in the water and clunk, flash, here it comes. That's very much attuned to what meditation does. It gives you the space to let that other part of your brain work. Comes in dreams. That's very much part of the dream life, that acausal nonsense type. Something we're really rather defended about. We don't like things that come like that. Part of this reality is that you count on it, just like it is, you know? You don't want to hear any of that other stuff. Well, I think there's a way that we're beginning to use something that's just a very natural part of our intelligence. It's not really extraordinary, except to us now because we think it's unusual, but that we have many talents and abilities, and in fact we use them anyway. We use them all the time. You use them when somebody comes into the room and you get a feeling about that something's bothering them, or maybe they're angry, even though they're being polite, you still feel they're angry. And it isn't always just body language. Sometimes you don't see someone and you start thinking about them and some kind of a thought, being concerned or something, and calling, and indeed they are having a problem. So we are tuned in many ways, and when someone dies or a baby is born, those are sort of real portal places, and people have a lot of psychic experiences around those times too. And I don't think it's just the stress or the grief. I think it is an interface place. It's a place where the psychic energy is stronger. And when people start sharing experiences that they've had, so we basically don't talk about it very much, especially death.
Yeah. Okay, okay, to me that explains a lot of, at least a little bit about the predestined thing.
How it can sort of coexist at the same time as that you actually have the will.
Yeah. That was sort of had a break and changed position.
Yes, we certainly did. That's it. The fish were nibbling our toes before, and now they still are, but we're in the shade.
Yeah, it's
We've paired it with the ground.
He'll be out there and boil himself out there. Okay, I don't think like predestiny and will is a pretty
that's
pretty
what we were talking about. Yes, great.
Okay, it's a pretty wide subject. I think maybe I got a little feel of it, but
it is.
I think maybe I'd like to leave that now and maybe go into a couple other things. A couple of questions that I had from the tape, and maybe if I can just sort of ask the question and hope that everybody else sort of can can get the drift of it. you were talking a lot about power.
Mm.
You know, when I think of power, I think of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just go a little bit farther to say that when I think of good and evil, it seems to me that you can't have one without the other. They're both there. They're both. Um, they both exist.
Well, it's whenever we do that either-or stuff, I think we get caught, is when we get in trouble. I think that there is a duality plane that we're in. There is a duality thing. It's in everything. It's in the plants, it's in the animals, it's in our logic, it's in our conversation, it's in our language, it's in our bodies. It's how cells work. There's polarities. There are dualities. And for me, evil, I like to change how I hold what evil is. I know that, everybody say evil, everybody gets an idea about what that is. But to me, evil is really just live spelled backwards. That what evilness is when you're not alive. When you hold fear in your own consciousness. When we resist life. When we don't trust the flow of the universe. When we don't trust that we're good and other people are good. When we don't trust that God is really in everything. When we kind of lose track of that, and we will, and there's nothing, I don't want to make that really big bad wrong either,
Yeah.
see? Because that's part of how we bring consciousness here. I just think that it's a much more powerful way to transform the world without matching. We almost create evil by thinking about it, by dwelling on it and hating it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how I think we sort of almost create wars by hating wars. That doesn't mean to say the opposite is that you must love wars. Obviously not. But maybe in a way you do. What I mean is that you don't say, you trust that for some reason the universe is unfolding as it should. Everything that's already happened, there's value in it. We just have to discover what it is. And take responsibility to not to contribute to anything else that doesn't feel right, that feels like it's wrong. If it feels bad, then there's something for us to become conscious of and to take responsibility for. In other words, to hate someone who's doing something that we'll all agree is not nice,
Mm-hmm.
does not stop what they are doing. It, in fact, supports what they are doing. And let me just do a little thing with power
Okay.
here. Maybe this will make it clear, because I realize how this sounds. For me, all the evil in the world comes from people believing in their powerlessness. That people do ruthless things to other people, do unkind things, do cruel things, because they believe that they are powerless, out of their own fear and desperation. And this is true of even like dictators who've got maybe 1,000 men who'd march off a cliff for them. Still, the driving personality compulsion for them is that they basically feel insecure. And you can see it to people who are bullies. And arrogance, that comes from not having confidence. It comes from not really believing that you're good. So, when someone is doing something evil, you don't support the thing they are doing that's harming. You don't support that, but you support them. You look to the good in them, and you say, I know you're believing you're desperate or you're bad or you bought a tape that you're even no good, and I'm not going to go into agreement with that. True, I don't like what you're doing, and I don't. You may have to speak loud and clear about that. But as far as the person goes, you send them love. You acknowledge the good within them. And if you do that, I've seen it happen so many times that the person who's doing something quote-unquote bad, they stop doing it. Because nobody likes it. Nobody likes to do bad stuff. I never could understand that anyway when I was a kid. I was trying to figure out, well, why do people do things that are bad? It doesn't really feel good. It only feels good when you're coming from fear and powerless. It's better than feeling so terribly fearful. You do something violent or harmful. I mean, I never could understand why people do bad things for kicks.
Yeah.
That didn't make sense. It was only because it was a relief for a moment. In destroying something, they felt powerful. Now, what you do is you support they already are powerful, therefore they don't have to destroy anything. In other words, to me, all the evil in the world comes from people believing in their powerlessness, and that if you really want to transform the world and bring good into it, and you don't like something bad that's happening, send your trust and your confidence and your love and acknowledgement about them being divine beings, and that they will remember it. They will remember that. They will rediscover that. And then there's a different energy level. People don't do the same things. They act differently. I've seen that happen anyway. Try it. See?
Yeah, I think I have too. The thing that I'm wondering about is, and maybe this is getting a little bit too, too nitpicky or something, but it seems that we're working on a different definition of power.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
true.
um,
That's true. I hold power differently than you hold power.
Yeah, I think so.
Or most people, for sure. I do.
Okay,
It's
because
true.
the thing the person that pops into my mind when I'm talking about power and evil is Idi Amin.
Yes, that's common thought.
Now there seems to be a person that has all the power in the world
Mm-hmm.
at his disposal, and
Mm-hmm.
there also seems to be the person that is
Yes.
evil
Yes.
incarnate. I mean,
Yes.
he's there,
Yes.
and you still feel that someone like that is basically good.
I believe everyone is good, yes, everyone. Everyone that has ever lived is good. Everyone is a piece of God. I really believe the old fundamentalist thought that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, and omniscient. So that he feels, sees, is present in everything, and that is everything. It's that dragonfly, it's these little fish nibbling at our feet, it's you, it's me, it's the trees, it's Idi Amin, it's everyone. And it's all the bad things that we've ever done. It really is, if you can't forgive, if you have to put someone in such a mysterious, evil box that no way can you send them love, that's a piece of you that you can't love. Because they are in your experience, and it's you who's thinking. I mean, you've never met Idi Amin, and neither have I.
No.
We have reports, and I'm sure a lot of the facts are so. I'm sure a lot of them aren't, that are presented as facts. There are many things we don't know, but what I do know is that what I do is send love to him to realize who he is, so he need not do cruel things to anyone else. That he did not need to feel so insecure that he has to be an arrogant whatever or do whatever. I'm not even that familiar with him. One of the people that used to be brought up when I was doing workshops was Richard Nixon, especially when the Watergate thing happened. And it was very interesting because I had a feeling when the Watergate thing was cracking open that he might kill himself or he might become ill. And I remember I told a few friends that, and then he got the phlebitis. And I remember really sending him love and healing him, sending energy to his leg and hoping that, really saying to him, stay around. Because, if you stop to think about it, he was an incredible archetype, kind of representative, really, of a piece of American consciousness. He really represented our country, not in everything, of course, but in a piece of what we were working on and needing to take responsibility for and be conscious of. And I really think it's Ram Dass who said, someone either told him or he was saying that all the great big powerful beings up in heaven sit around together and say, okay, which one of us gets to be the bad guy this time? In other words, there's a sort of like a karmic or consciousness expanding responsibility in allowing yourself to be born into a situation where you get programmed with forgetting that you're good, believing in your powerlessness, and becoming even a public figure representing that. Evil, bad, a bad leader. Again, to send love, to acknowledge the goodness within them, supports their consciousness in remembering who they are and no longer needing to do the things that really are obviously not good for us, that hurt.
Okay, I think that kind of goes back to what I was first saying about there being both good and evil. I feel that what you're saying is that it goes back to again to predestiny. That there's people like Idi Amin, people like Richard Nixon, people like Hitler, that come every once in a while, so that people can use the power that they have to overcome this. Is that is that accurate?
I think that's true. There's a very ancient saying that says, everyone is your mirror. And it's a Chinese saying. And by that, I think what that means is that there's no one in there but you, and there's no one in here but me. The thoughts I think are really mine. Indeed, I've learned a lot of things from other people, but really how I hold it and what I think is me. So if I think, ooh, that person's evil, really bad, and I let my imagination really run wild with how bad they are and how terrible, out of my own participation in the collective unconscious and fears about something bad happening, or, you say demonic, you say bad words, you know, things that scare people. I call that the boogeyman now, that the terror is real, the fear people feel is real, but that the source of it isn't. And it's only a matter of consciousness, of sort of, in a way, our maturity. And I don't want to make that sound like we're childish or something, only that we are a constantly evolving being. Human beings are still growing.
Yeah.
We are still expanding. And part of what we are expanding to, I think, is a realization that a lot of things can fit where before they didn't look like they could fit. Just as a child is truly terrified of the boogeyman in a room that is darkened and can be so terrified as to get sick to their stomach or get really ill or jump out the window and really break their leg. So something really happened, real physical repercussion, but there was no boogeyman in the room. The fear of it is what causes the grief. So I think fear is the opposite of love, not hate.
Not evil.
Yes.
Huh.
And that fear is merely a lack of consciousness. And that as we investigate something and we discover what it is, we will naturally no longer fear it. And we will have done what we are here to do, which is to bring consciousness into the universe.
Okay. I think I'm beginning to grasp what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like I was going to say an inward exploratory trip, but that doesn't do it either. It's
And it is
it's
that.
partly that, and it seems to be partly more.
Yes.
But maybe I could just kind of go into a little bit about love and about God, because it seems that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a religious background, and I would like to think that I'm not totally wrong about that. You know that, and
I don't think so.
yeah,
It's a pretty good place to come from, loving God.
Yeah, but I think I think one of the things that religion seems to teach is that we're imperfect. We're
Well, aren't we?
well,
In a way. I mean, we're figuring it out still.
Yeah.
Yet. See,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, and that's used to be what got me in the Bible when it said, you're born in sin, and you're evil, and you have to see that, you know. And I think, gosh, you know what? I can't accept that. And then I started to realize, it always hooked me too. I knew there was something in it, but it wasn't right either. And what it is, if you hold that evil is merely unconsciousness and fear, and that evil is the lack of aliveness, then of course we are all born into unconsciousness. We are all born into not understanding certain things and being afraid and hurting things because of our fear.
Yeah.
We are all born in that, indeed. And what we are going to do, and see, this is what the end of the duality game thing means, when you can hold two things at once, the yes and the yes, you know, free will and destiny. If you let two things be simultaneous, there's a way that's a paradox where two opposites seem to have a compatible meaning.
Yeah.
That, to me, is where we're going, that our minds are going to be able to hold that kind of thought, so that at the same time we can be imperfect and perfect. So that we can be imperfect discovering, and at the same time we are a piece of God experiencing itself.
It's gonna take a while for that to sink in.
Yeah.
What I was I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that. It's just sort of done it for me. Boy, that water's nice right on the surface. Nice.
Not supposed to enjoy the water too much. We're being serious.
Okay. Just before we make some technical changes there,
Yes.
we were talking about how the average person's stuck in the mediocrity of, slugging out a living day to day.
Yes.
How does he get onto this?
Well, actually, that's the whole purpose of my workshops, is really to talk about that, to really get the sense that it is in the day-to-day problems and difficulties. Wherever you have a problem is exactly a place where you feel discomfort, where you feel frustration. That is exactly a place you're growing. That's why you've actually chosen it in a way. Originally, we choose it all just by being born, by being here, taking the time and point in time and space into which we come, and the parents and the culture and everything. And then we just take it on, and then we have to sort of figure it all out. Well, what the problems are, like, money or the job or the boss or boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, children, parents, all of those places where there's intimate relationship or where there is ongoing human activity, wherever there's an obstacle or a difficulty, that's a place where you can grow and hold what is happening different. And what's causing your pain is how you're holding it.
Okay, can you run that by me once more?
Okay.
Okay.
Wherever there's a problem or a crisis or a difficulty or a frustration, that is the growing edge. That is the place where you are actually expanding. If people could realize that it isn't just terrible and too bad and what we're trying to do is just make everything nice, and we are, but that isn't all of it. That the meaning to life is much more profound than that. We are actually bringing a gift by allowing ourselves to have been programmed with problems. In other words, say if your shirt were dirty, it isn't, but if it were dirty, you could say, I have this dirty shirt, and it's mine, but it's not me. In other words, the problems or the evils we do or are involved with are ours, and we've got to take care of them. We are responsible, but it's not us. We are good. The stuff we've taken on to be looked at and transformed, that is our gift in coming, being alive. So if you hold it like that, and that's just a way to say it, I'm not locking in on that in any way, but if you hold it like that, then you begin to look at life a little differently. Then when a challenge comes up, you really do try to see, because it's funny how they're the same old ones over and over, aren't they? Everybody keeps getting the same basic patterns over and over again in relationships and everything.
Yeah.
The same kinds of basic problems keep coming up. And that is because there is a kind of overall unconsciousness we each take on that we have to transform. And I don't think that's too bad. I think that's wonderful. And when you begin to realize that, then you get value out of being alive. Then life isn't hoping for tomorrow to be better. It's for making right now better. It's for living now and enjoying now and getting value out of now. Now, let me give you an example. Say if you're angry at your boss because your boss is really incompetent and he's always telling you to do things and he's giving you bad advice and you're holding the whole business together. You're doing it right. He's not. And he's not only, on top of it, he's not acknowledging you because he feels defensive, and that's usually fairly obvious.
Maybe powerless?
Powerless, exactly. Right? You're quick. Good. So he does, in fact, do nastier and nastier things to you as you get nastier and nastier or even more superior and more superior about how you're doing it right, and he doesn't know how. You are supporting his powerlessness. You are not supporting his power. But if you take on a job that is just, you realize that your job is your job and that you're choosing to do it for your own satisfaction and to make money and to support yourself and your family and to be able to participate even more in life, that you're doing it for your own satisfaction, then the best way to make your job work is to support the person you're working for and make things work well around them and support them. One of the things that I discovered, this happened to me once, when there was someone I was very annoyed with because I thought they were incompetent. And in a lot of ways one could say they were, it was out there. But what it was that the reason I had the energy between that person is that I was intolerant of incompetence. I didn't like incompetence. I would never let me be incompetent. I would stand on my head and roll over backwards before I would be incompetent. So to see someone else in charge over me not being competent was annoying, to say the least, especially when they would tell me to do incompetent things.
Yeah.
What I realized was that the whole drama was really mine. Not that she wasn't actually doing some of these things, but that it was all for me to learn that perhaps people who she was seeing and working with were matching with her in a perfect way, and what she was doing with them was fine. Her advice for me, for my clients, was not good, because I had to handle that. And that I didn't have to worry about that, and that she could offer her advice, and that I could, in fact, just listen to it and let her have her say. And if I wasn't making her wrong, as a matter of fact, she sometimes did come out with very good advice. As long as I was holding her in the context of being dumb or incompetent, she was so defended and so insecure that she, in fact, was nervous and wasn't doing a good job. So when I realized all that, I really immediately felt a lot of love for her. I realized it was myself. It was my own anger at my possible incompetence that I was projecting out on her. In fact, she may have really been doing things too. See, you have to keep that up in there too.
Okay.
But when I realized that it was a lesson for me, and I got the value out of it, and I sent her love and really began to support her, she bloomed. She was doing incredibly better. It changed.
Okay, but that's what you're...
And if she needs to be incompetent with somebody else, she can do that dance with him. Not with me. I don't see her that way anymore.
Okay, but it seems to me what you're asking is you're asking for people to take on a tremendous responsibility.
Yes, complete.
Yeah.
100%.
It's
a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot, yeah.
But you know what's wonderful about it? When you do that, you no longer feel powerless. At first, it seems like you would be, because that seems like so much responsibility, because we think in terms of responsibility as blame. But I'm not talking about blame. I'm talking about respondability, freeing yourself to really participate in the world and respond. And if you take responsibility for what is your consciousness perception, you open the door to no longer feel a victim to anyone else. It goes back and forth, of course, because we're not all there yet. But it is a moving direction that you can feel. So that if you take responsibility, it isn't. And the only reason that seems heavy is because if one thinks in terms of blame and powerlessness. But if you really realize what's happening, if you take responsibility for how you feel, then you didn't make me feel bad. I make me feel bad when you say. You go through this motion. I've been told, if my boyfriend loved me, he would bring me flowers and buy me candy. He doesn't bring me flowers and buy me candy. You don't love me anymore. You know? That's a very oversimplified thing. But that's exactly what we do in many complicated ways. We've been programmed with, if you did care for me, you would do this. So when somebody goes through this motion, some motion, then we say, uh-oh, that means something. We make a conclusion. And it usually brings us a hassle. We usually feel sad, we feel lost, we feel depressed. But if we say, when you make this motion, I feel that something should happen. Not that they did it to you. Do you get the difference? Maybe I'm being too abstract.
I think so.
I might be being too abstract.
Let me see if I can... In other words, what you're saying is the fact that the person, all he did was make the motion. And your responsibility lies in what you got from it.
Exactly. Yeah. But what we add things. There's a simple motion, and we add a conclusion. And when we add that, that's when we feel our grief. And to know what you've added, this I know this is tricky, and especially in, bigger issues. But start out with little ones and see what it brings. It brings a lot of space. It brings a lot of relief. It brings a lot more time feeling joy and aliveness than going around being depressed and angry. And I think depressed, too, the word is a wonderful word. It's when we depress our energy, when we hold back the flow of the universe through us, when we don't trust it. Well, I can't tell them that. They'll get mad at me. Or they won't like me anymore. Or they'll think I'm rude, or I may look stupid. When we depress, when we invalidate ourselves, that's all lack of love for yourself, not trusting your own spontaneous perception of the world. And we will have different ones. We won't have the same. That's what's exciting. I get to hear your perceptions and you get to hear mine. We've got it set up that if you don't think the same as me, you're disagreeing with me and you think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It's wonderful you have one and I have one. And then we can share it. I think ultimately that'll all fit. And we'll get a whole perception. Ties in with the telepathy.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I keep jumping around.
What I was just thinking right then was that what you're saying, what you obviously believe, from where I'm sitting,
yes.
looks so far away from what is actually happening today.
Yes.
Because people are brought up to believe that I mean, there's the whole thing of
it's
competitiveness
true. It's true. It's all true.
And so how do you remain sane with with?
Well, one of the things I'm trying to say is that even though that's all true, and I really can see how you could see that, I think we can all change and are very fast. I think we are all transforming energy, and this is what I call it, transforming energy. When you change something from feeling at effect of it and feeling frightened and angry, or having it be that emotion, turning it around so that you can feel good, and it's all right if somebody thinks something different from you. When you can turn that around that way, you bring aliveness into your life, you bring aliveness into the planet. You become a kind of walking radiance of that. You don't match with people. You give them space to go on their journey and not make them wrong. That everyone has to make their journey their own way. And you can just say, I support you in your journey. And you can say, and you know, a neat way is this. And you share it out of your experience and out of your love and out of it worked for you. Some of it may work for them. And then they can take out, then that's them choosing what works for them. That's why I always say, you know, I share what I do and I say what I am, but it's there for you to get value out of if you do, and I hope you do, and it delights me when people do. It's great joy. But if they don't, then that's okay too. Then, you know, they'll get it somewhere else. I know they will. They'll get what they need. They will create what they need. I acknowledge their beauty and their goodness and their God within, and that they're unfolding exactly as they should.
Okay, okay.
Makes it easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And what else can you do about it anyway?
I suppose you're right.
You know, if you sit and get angry about how people are handling something over there, just you sit and feel angry on a beautiful day. And it's your belly that hurts.
Yeah.
They're going to go do what they're doing anyway. But at a psychic level, at a spiritual level, by sending them love and support in their goodness, you are acknowledging that within them, and that actually gets matched. There's, I think, a kind of law of matching energy. And when you send out love, it calls forth love. When you send out fear, it calls forth fear.
Okay, that's good, because that's kind of like what I wanted to get into as next. Okay, and a lot of what you've been saying kind of feels to me the same as, because of my religious background, that you know, love your neighbor and treat your fellow man as you like to be treated yourself. But the thing about the energy, about transporting the energy to another person, is it's kind of with it, but it's also like a new dimension of that.
Yeah, it is.
And can you sort of explain that a little bit more about how do we transport our energy from ourselves to somebody else?
I think maybe one way to say it is like through our concentration or through our perception. It's like if I look at you and I really look at you and I let myself experience you, and when you talk, I really let myself hear and feel everything you're meaning, then I don't only hear the words, I feel your real intention. That's when people really communicate well, when you really do that. And when I talk to you, I do it, again, focusing on you very clearly. Well, when you do that, you've made the channel very clear and very open for this energy, quote unquote. See, I know that a lot of the things I say sound a little strange even, and that even some of the language I use purposefully is a little different, because I don't want people to go into old boxes. I want them to start to look at it different, because if you go from the old box, then that's right where you are. You haven't discovered the new place. But I really feel that 9/10 of my workshops and communication is really telepathic. I think it's energy. I think we do it all the time, all of us. Mother and child, you can really see it. That's the main essence of communication in the early years. How do you think little newborn babies in a year and a half are talking? How do they do that? You know, there's a whole big link. There's a whole other deeper link of absorbing information that we have available to us. And part of what we learn in that time is that you can't do it. We use it to learn you can't do it. And then we think, what do you mean, you have a funny feeling in your arm? What is it? Something wrong with your arm? You may say, I have this feeling in my arm, right? You know, people will go, you'll get that message real quick. What do you mean you have a funny feeling in your arm? Something's wrong? Immediately the conclusion, it's wrong. It's not good. Fortunately, we made up the term growing pains for adolescents. It covers a whole...
Yeah. I think the things that you know, certainly in a mother and a child, there's a lot of love and emotion and feeling there, and that can be, I think I can see how that can be passed from the mother to the child fairly
Yes.
easily.
Yes.
But how about as we get older? You know, in your
We
situation.
shut it down because we're told it's not cool, it's not good, it's dangerous, it's vulnerable.
Okay, but how do we open it up?
You risk. You risk communicating. You risk saying your truth. You risk saying what really is for you without making somebody wrong if they can't agree with you. You know, I don't say go, you know, buttonhole everyone on the street and say, hey, do you know? But with a friend or someone who is wanting to talk to you, say, hey, you know what happened? This happened. Or this is an experience I had. And they go, really? You know, you say, yeah. But if you say, if you respect your own experience and your own perceptions, they may only be part of the truth, but there's a reason why they're there. And when you acknowledge them or talk about them, then you share that, and that maybe opens a space for someone else to share something else, and then together you get a more complete view of the truth. And that is how we grow. That's how we really can creatively share. Having tolerance for someone else's experience is really another way of having tolerance for your own. That's back to the people being your mirror.
Okay, I think I know what you're saying, and I feel good with what you're saying. The thing that I'm trying to get straight in my own head is taking what you're saying from here, from this lovely setting,
Yes.
back into the city.
Yes. Think okay.
You know?
Think of a problem in the city. A simple one. I mean, we don't have to. You know, big ones take longer to explain.
Yeah.
But a simple one, a hassle.
Okay, just before we get into that, let's just a problem for me is maintaining levels of communication. Okay, it seems that's a lot of what we're talking about is you and I sitting here and maintaining the openness and the trust
Yes.
that goes along with it.
Yes. Which means respect and love.
Yes,
Trust.
but it has levels. So I think if I'm getting you right, when my level goes down, then that's not you, but that's something in me that I.
Yes.
I just
Maybe
have
that
to-
I can't communicate anymore. Maybe I couldn't talk about something. Maybe I have a lot of business and fear around a certain subject, say, that you would bring up. So then suddenly you would feel me distant and you would no longer feel trust. You could say it was my fault, you know, because I went away. But then if you realize I only went away because that's what I had to do because of the stuff that I'm working on, and that in a way it has nothing to do with you. So then you can keep your love still going, and you can appreciate and perceive what's happening and say, okay, well, we disagree on that, or we don't have to talk about that one, or I see that differently than you.
So you're changing
So we
the
don't
whole
have to
thing
lose
from
the
right
trust.
and wrong into it being an indistant. See, like the word that keeps going through my mind is acceptance.
Yes,
You know,
there's a lot to do with
accepting how I am, rather than saying, well, oh, I made a mistake. You know.
And you can accept that you made a mistake. You can make a mistake. You make mistakes all the time. We do make mistakes. But a mistake is just part of the learning process. It's part of the growth process. You have to make mistakes. It's how you discover what is. So we just don't have to add that that's bad. But you don't. And who would want to do something that hurt and didn't work over and over again? And we do it. But I mean, but who would want to do it knowing you didn't have to do it?
Yeah.
Knowing how not to do it. What happens is it gets compulsive. In fact, I really feel that all compulsion comes from so resisting something, so making it wrong, so not wanting to see it. It kind of squeaks out and happens anyway. So again, it's acceptance. The more space you give yourself, it's all consciousness. It's the more you begin to realize what it is you're doing. And it really has a great deal to do with being kind to yourself. We are very hard on ourselves. I am always astounded when I tune into people how hard you are. I think everyone is more ruthless on themselves than they are would ever dream of being to anyone else. that we are always checking ourselves out
Yeah.
and always trying to find that thing, you know.
Okay, I just,
Little fish.
I would just like to finish up by, maybe you could just expound a little bit on where you see this whole thing going, and you know, just
Yes.
sort of your overall plan or vision of how you see it.
Right. Well, I have a feeling about that, a sense of it. I certainly don't know the details. That's obviously to be created by all of us as we do it. But I have a very powerful sense that, in fact, really part of it came in a vision of how we were all going to really channel the light, really be loving, discover how to actually love ourselves while in a body, which from my point of view automatically means you then see everyone else in terms of love, since they are kind of a projection of our own. Everything you hate sort of is a projection of your own shadow anyway, so as you take responsibility for that, then you're in the position of transforming that and undoing it, and that brings you into more and more light. And I think it's interesting, in the Bible it says that when the Messiah comes again, there will be chaos and upheaval. And in fact, Jesus said, you know, in the future, when my name is spoken, there'll be dissension and there'll be, you know, there'll be this sadness. I think it all came as part of the last 2,000 and some years, was really a journey into discovering all of this. I think every life that's ever lived has been meaningful, and every moment in your life has been of value and fits somewhere, and that we're moving to a place where we can hold all that. And part of holding all that is holding one another. Through our own complete uniqueness, we discover our oneness. Again, the paradox.
Yeah.
That as you really trust your own uniqueness, there's no one else in the universe just like you, or anyone else, that as we trust that and value that, we begin to open up then to totally being free to receive other people's perceptions and experiences, and they ours, and then there's that flow of oneness, paradoxically from the experience of uniqueness, and trusting it. So what I really see is we're kind of evolving. We're becoming another kind of being, really. Still us, but more. And there's even some evidence that evolutionary leaps happen in as quick a time span as 20 years. And I have a feeling that, I know it doesn't seem like that, but I think everybody is working on it, everyone. I think everyone on the planet is somewhere knows it, somewhere is getting ready for releasing their old grief and knowing that it's old and it really doesn't have anything that much really to do with who they are now, and let themselves be who they are now and feel joy and experience the love and interaction. And I think it's going to happen in a short amount of time, like 20 years.
Well, I believe you're right.
Yes.
And I hope that this little thing has gone something to put that forward a little more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Many blessings.
Thanks.